I begin by extending a recognition to the Tongva Nubu Serrano and the federally recognized Yuhabiatam of San Manuel Nation, and to all those Indigenous First Nations who remain unrecognized by nation states, whose unceded, stolen traditional Indigenous homelands I call and have called home. There needs to be a stop to the cruel and continuous removal of Indigenous peoples from their homelands for any reason, including due to rising housing prices. I echo the demands to give land back and respect Indigenous sovereignty. I join my voice to demand that the forced fragmentation, suppression, dehumanization, and cutting down of Indigenous lands, knowledges, and peoples of the Americas is acknowledged as what it is, a genocide, an extended Holocaust that continues to take place under the matrix of colonial power, the current global necropolitical telos that continues to function in detriment of a majority for the benefit of an extreme global minority privileged by supremacy in all of its forms. I want to thank Professor Brigitte Hosia and the organizing committee of the 2023 Ecstatic Truth Decolonizing Animation Symposium for the invitation. I'm honored to speak at a platform shared with cultural activist, curator, and producer Helen Starr, and I applaud their support in developing the decolonial theme of this symposium. Thank you for the inspiration and for the strong and noteworthy efforts toward the decolonial shift found in your work. I also want to state that I value the efforts also found in the work of all the symposium participants. No estamos solos. We are not alone. We are doing this. We have been doing this and will continue to. The title of this talk is Shifting Toward Decoloniality, a Transfronteriza Nepantleras Rascuache Tactics in New Media Art and Animation. So what is all that? I'm not defining everything from the get-go. Please hold my hand and I will show you how the context of my identity and experiences in coloniality influences my work with pushing forth the shift toward decoloniality by using and disrupting new media art and animation. Decoloniality is an ongoing transgenerational and pluridimensional shifting process. It is not a hat we can simply put on and wear out. Suddenly there's money and prestige and all of this, opportunities everywhere for this type of discourse, art, and knowledge production. Hence, the amalgamation of decoloniality and capitalist coloniality is rampant. We're still in the thick of clarifying that decoloniality is a series of ongoing actions, understandings, feelings, notions, experiences, transgressions, and risks that for some are more dangerous to engage in than for others due to the intersectional spectrum of possible power relationships in the tension coloniality, decoloniality. Nobody owns decoloniality, but some get a front row 4D immersive experience, while others get to watch from the center or further away. I'm not going to just tell you who I am, because it may most likely be a lie anyway. I will instead attempt to demonstrate spirals of reasoning that are interconnected in decolonial thought and which frame my multiple identities into the way I approach animation, new media art production, and also life itself. As a brown Chicana Mexican American who's politically and spiritually aware of my indigeneity and Kumeyaay ancestry in a context where our indigenous cultures and languages were violently taken away from many of us, as well as the legacy of a family who took revolutionary arms against coloniality for at least 2 generations, I'm currently paying for being who I am or daring to just be who I am openly and unapologetically. In institutional spaces like the arts and academia, people of color are expected to perform a code switching dance where you make yourself appear less threatening to supremacists by adopting a way of dressing, speaking, or simply existing that in turn also serves to uphold the supremacy or centralization of the US Anglo-Dutch culture. Ever since I started my career in academia, I have refused to engage in this dance due to a mixture of my own personal privileges and perhaps also because my ancestral DNA boils within me, telling me, no, it's your turn. This must change. For at least 8 years, I have been paying harshly for pushing forward the decolonial turn from my own institution and from multiple dimensions. I do this work by engaging who I am in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in hiring, as well as in the support and retention of women of color faculty for my university. I suffer hate and retaliation not from higher ups, but from peers who gang up, bully, and block vote me out of responsibilities in our department with the excuse that I'm too biased and engaged in an effort to de-whiten the institution. These are responsibilities that I have an excellent record for and more than equipped to take on. People who follow the rules and speak up against such violent actions are also targeted and retaliated against as a form of punishment for daring to do so. People claim to be afraid of being called racist, the nature of their anger, and the justification for their abuse. Parallel situations are experienced by colleagues engaging in similar work where individuals sign up to university committees to block proposals and other professional development projects from receiving recognition or funding opportunities. Due to not knowing my place, as has been said more than once by someone I work with, I'm constantly policed and reported for the most insignificant and ridiculous reasons. For example, I could be reported for what I'm stating in this talk today. Yeah, freedom of speech is not for everyone, according to those who uphold coloniality. The hostility I experience in my work environment has had dire effects and serious repercussions on my health and sense of well-being. The time I have spent responding to attacks, emailing leadership, meeting with colleagues who are concerned for me adds up. And this takes away from the time that should be allocated for me to do my job and also to produce knowledge that is now accumulating in an ever-growing to-do list. It has had a negative impact on my ability to be there for my community. I'm afraid of working from my own office. I am in a constant battle stance, but I will not be silenced. After all, my life experiences are what made me an artist. My stance has earned me the name Dr. Machete. The humble machete is a tool and weapon that is related to indigenous and Mexican revolutionary efforts. My machete is mainly my tongue, but it is also my entire being and what it represents. My mere presence raises thoughts of fear and danger from supremacists who are afraid I will expose their logic of coloniality, and instead of working on themselves to try to change, they rather work harder to make me pay, well in advance, by the way. I am aware of my privileges and the possibilities and costs for my transgressions. For others, the anti-colonial work represents much worse possible consequences, and I honor my peers by disrupting institutions like academia and continuing this work in my own contextualized dimensions. Mystic Machete is the part of me that vibes, that turns shit and garbage into art, channeling Tlazolteotl from Aztec mythology, a representation of filth and purification. She eats dirt/filth, like I have to eat a lot of shit myself. And Tlazolteotl turns this into purification, beauty, life, rebirth. The mystic Machete allows her ability for king comebacks and trickery for mystical purposes to rest, for producing art and knowledge, in order to seek a multidimensional contemplation and a self-surrender to what is the reality I live in, but that many of us also share within our own personal contexts. As Mystic Machete, there's an understanding of spiritual and carnal ways of knowing and the deep interconnectedness of all. When there's something that at first looks pretty bad, it can actually be turned and repurposed for greater good. It is about doing what I can with what I have to engage in, tactics that are aware of both the micro and macrocosmic planes in which I navigate. While the labels can be mouthfuls that are seemingly counterproductive to the efforts toward decoloniality, it is also a type of performative act, a baile de máscaras or masquerade, I think it's what it's called in English, that serves to mythify and validate my experiences and framework before you, while I also simultaneously ruin the mystique by explaining what is supposed to be implied and thus removing any highbrow, artsy, or scholarly expectations. Yet I'm also thinking, well, don't I also have the right to be enigmatic and demand that you do not expect me to fill in the gaps and be thrilled at the opportunity of having to figure it out all on your own? Just like the huge thrill it was for me when I was learning English as a child from racist teachers, Or when I went to Berkeley as an undergraduate, and about 70% of the English that was used by my professors made no sense to me. Or when I read the classics, then Descartes and Nietzsche with parts in Greek, Latin, French, and German. And I had to figure out what they were saying, but more importantly, why only the ideas of dead white men mattered. And only their perspectives had to matter to me. By the way, such as the dissonance and the lack of inclusion of non-European theoretical frameworks, that about 4 years ago, I had a group of students get mad and go to our dean to report me for using Spanish in the classroom and daring to use theoretical work written in Spanish, Nahuatl, and English by Chicana queer artist and theorist Gloria Anzaldúa. Historically, in the U.S. Southwest, Chicanos and other Latina people would be hung and lynched for speaking Spanish and being too proud to be Mexican or uppity. Thankfully, our leadership had the sense to understand when I asked why the same disgust was not expressed when students had to read theory in other languages. Was it the biggest offense to use Spanish and Nahuatl? Or that it was from a Chicana feminist queer perspective? Perhaps all of the above? From the life I've lived as a brown woman, assumed to be an immigrant living in the United States, it has been drilled into me that only certain people can have the agency to propose new things, be met from their personal location, be complex, intriguing, use their culture, their language, themselves to demand curiosity and interest from their audiences. During my formative years as an artist, and even to this day as a scholar, I constantly fight against the idea and feeling that only some people are doted with the personal agency required to even believe that they can be proponents or creators of something. But look at us now in 2023. Here we are speaking about these issues before an amazing international audience. And it has only taken us how long? 531 years? All of us, the others or aliens, have suddenly become the cool kids. Yet, as praised as our work is, as interesting our writing can be to the world, we're still currently burdened with a life in coloniality and an array of expectations that come with it. Like, for example, family dying in our homeland in the hands of colonizers, as is the case for Palestinians. And for us Mexicans, and for other Latin Americans, and specifically for Central Americans and Caribbeans, dealing with the repercussions of the ill treatment of migrants at the border and the increasing violence. Yet we're expected to always take extra steps, do 200, 300, 400%. And not only do you need to explain every little bit of your perspective, but defend it. Defend it. You don't have the luxury of simply enunciating. Also, we don't really have to explain anything, but some of us will as a courtesy and because we know the decolonial shift requires a simultaneous interdimensional push from as many directions as possible, if not all. Through and beyond these spaces, we are also reaching out to those who are marginalized and enveloped by this experience of coloniality from parallel situations to ours. It's not black or white. There are many overlapping issues. I have personally encountered some quote unquote decolonial artists, for example, who want to reject all previous formulations, symbols, iconographies found, for example, in Chicano art and expression, and that's fine. But it's another form of internalization when they turn around and try to raise their own decolonial work while invalidating the work of artists who led to this point in time with their work from the in-between or nepantla of this decolonial shift. These impositions, which pretend to be decolonial, are imposing a newfound form of purism that is a distorted, desperate imitation of supremacy, an oversimplified binary perspective that sees decoloniality as a hat and not a spectrum toward decoloniality. Our knowledge production and experiences are still a mystery to domineering and Eurocentric spaces. Some people are against decoloniality occurring in such places, but I disagree. The turn must be a simultaneous effort. With Transfronteriza Nepantlera en Rascuache, I am referring to identities, methods, and sensibilities that have been present for hundreds of years, but yet have been named and identified since the mid to the end of the 20th century in the settings of academia, critical race theory, Chicana studies, and the arts, which in turn are located in Western European notions of knowledge. All of this I just explained serves as evidence of the continuous presence of coloniality, where we inhabit a spectrum of multiple levels of marginalization and minoritization. Transfronteriza roughly translates to transborderite. It is a Baja California Mexican border identity proposed by Norma Iglesias Prieto for people who cross the border daily, mainly for the purposes of education and or entertainment. This is versus the people who cross as migrants. For them, crossing the border is like the experience of a gladiator in a coliseum, a life or death experience. But for the transfronteriza, it is like the experience of a luchadora libre who goes to the gym perhaps even twice per day and practices on the ring. To transfronterizas, the border is like the jumping cords around the ring, which they use to propel themselves in and out with even greater force. They have been trained in the methods of coloniality and developed their own decolonial methods within the context of this intensified border experience. As a transfronteriza or a perpetual border crosser of the Tijuana-San Diego border region, located in the most western point between the US and Mexico, I grew up crossing the Tijuana-San Isidro border daily. The functions and relationships between power structures and individuals manifested themselves to me in an intensified way. Added to this is my experience as a Nepantlera and a Chicana first-generation scholar, daughter of immigrants in the US. According to Gloria Ansaldúa, among the many possible variations of the new mestiza, Nepantleras are unique as they are survivors who have been transformed by their encounters with and within Nepantla. Nepantla represents the liminal in-between that exists and does not exist, el no lugar, the non-place. Nepantla or nepantlerismo is the indefinable in the nucleus of the individual essence, crossroads, a sort of neutrality, an inconclusive metamorphosis. It is also an embodiment. To the people today known as the Aztecs, el tiempo y el espacio no eran abstractos, sino que confluían como sitios y acontecimientos. Time and space are not seen as abstract. They participate just like spaces and events do. I experienced transfronterismo nepantlero because of a deep consciousness in the decolonial stance in my indigenous and revolutionary ancestry and the deep intergenerational wounds and collective knowledge, which added dimensions of perception to my already transfronteriza perspective. For Ansaldúa, Nepantla also represents psychic and intellectual points of crisis, occurring during the many transitional stages of life, and can describe issues and concerns related to identity, aesthetics, epistemology, and or ontology. The transfronteriza nepantlera is the politically hyperconscious version of the transfronteriza that is aware of her indigeneity and the myriad of interconnections that exist beyond binary impositions in the tension, coloniality, decoloniality at the Baja border and beyond. Nepantleras are those who inhabit the in-between, living among multiple worlds. Through painful negotiations, they develop perspectives from the cracks. Transfronteriza nepantleras deal with another form of trauma, one of wounds that can never heal because you're always on guard from an intensified consciousness. The intensified transfronteriza nepantlera experience did something to my way of seeing the world. What at first I thought as only translating words turned out to be a translation of cultural concepts, theories, disciplines, idiosyncrasies, entire worlds. This sensibility woke me to the existence of the tensions between simultaneous overlapping perspectives existing in multiple dimensions of this transborder experience. The quotidian day-to-day constant conscientization of the transfronteriza nepantlera is sprinkled with quotidian events of coloniality or racial and gender forms of violence that may escape this otherwise cool description. If someone asks me to describe in a few words what I have experienced as a nepantlera, which is different from just being a transfronteriza, I would say that it's like getting fucked over with a smile from all sides. You are beaten into deeply knowing that it's all bullshit. The ambivalence from the clash of voices, but also from the points in which they unite as a chorus of coloniality, results in mental and emotional states of complexity. Internal intertwined levels of constant dissonance result in the development of an unapologetic confidence and assertiveness with a lengua de machete, a machete tongue, hocicona en varios idiomas, a multilingual big mouth, porque pues ya que? What else can happen? In a constant state of mental nepantlism, the transfronteriza nepantlera is a product of transvergence or of the making of the alien, the perpetual foreigner from cultural, spiritual, and other values which become highly questionable in all groups. The transfronteriza nepantlera faces daily opportunities to call this all out. This intensified analog consciousness is the same that gives us an insight that other transfronterizos may not have. Transfronteriza nepantleras take what they can from the cracks, but also from dominating nationalistic identities imposed on both sides of the border. Due to their intensified experience with perpetual border crossing, nepantleras that are also transfronterizas move more assertively across multiple dimensions of coloniality, including nation-state borders, and use this knowledge to counteract coloniality in as many dimensions as possible. Nothing has to be done in any way, but it has to be done taking into account some issues perceived as limitations. As a transfronteriza nepantlera, I use new media art and experimental forms of animation to also question what it means to work with technology. Rascuache is a Chicano art concept, a sensibility and way of doing art in life that is directly inspired by the survival tactics of Chicano and other immigrant communities. It relates to making do with what is available. The butter container used for beans, the cookie can used for threads and bobs, the old bathtub that becomes a niche for the Virgin of Guadalupe, the toilet that is a multi-tiered garden planter. This involves an ingenuity based on recycling and upcycling, repurposing leftovers, making things appear as something else. And it's usually done in a liberated way that questions the borders between art and artisanry and the formulations of beauty and aesthetics found in coloniality. With this Rascuache transfronteriza nepantlera approach, I mythologize by making use of elements beyond conceptualizations related to the borderlands, because I want you to feel what I feel and see what I see in the simultaneously micro and macrocosmic plane of my sensibility. I reclaim and also repurpose some heavily overused Mexica iconography to counteract the silly purism that extends from overarching against coloniality to the point of becoming what you swore to destroy. When you start to see individual snippets as you would in a stop motion project, and then their compilation as transborder experiences in perpetual movement, you realize there are recurrent patterns. You'll ask yourself, what else is an artifice? What else is behind the animation of these impositions? What others are there? Too many. Accordingly, you also ask yourself, what kind of lens do I hold? How do I contribute? And to answer these and other questions, I indulge in playful and liberating rhizomatic and divergent transvergence toward an expansion of infinite possibilities toward these non-places composed of too many places. And now I will share with you 2 examples of my work.
Obliged to resist. In their footsteps, cruzamos las fronteras de letras y papeles. Today, as glorias maquiladoras, Guadalupes y chingadas, nepantleras, dwellers of the in-between. Yesterday, as las lloronas, malinches y marinas, artists formerly known as Cihuacóatl, mucho antes, Coatlicue, Tlazolteotl, Mayahuel, Chalchicuitle, Coyolxauqui, Tonantzin.
This piece was a big fuck you to the hierarchical understanding of what it means to use technology and what can be considered to be new media art. As a first-generation scholar, I did not have much guidance nor time. I learned of the existence of media art and technology during the end of my career as a PhD student. So coming from a multi-dimensional transfronteriza nepantlera Rascuache perspective, I created a world in virtual reality using a program called Tilt Rush, where I was able to incorporate multiple dimensions to create a feeling of immersion and what I refer to as an immersive no muralismo. It is a film that is recorded in virtual reality, and it is also a VR experience. Visually, there is an interdimensional collage transgressing from 2D to 3D in a multi-log between pieces of my own analog paintings and drawings. my digital interventions on digitized excerpts from Mexican murals depicting indigenous Mexico and the conquest of the Americas, and with it contesting that romanticized and patriarchal lens. Digitized pictographic excerpts taken from original pre-Columbian indigenous books, texts known as codices, reclaiming them from their current status, which is glossed over and intervened by Spanish priests and intercepted by Eurocentric academics. It also includes spoken word in Nahuatl, Spanish, and English, music by ethnomusicologist Juan Carlos Portillo, a minimalist musical intervention by Corey McCormick, and some audio special effects by me.
Healing wounds through paths of creative impulse, we enter battles.
The Coloniality Imperative 2020 is a journey into the indigenous mestiza, activist, decolonial, transfronteriza consciousness in search for her indigeneity from feminine shared experiences lived in the American continent across and between the border of Mexico and the United States. Chicana queer theorist and writer Gloria Anzaldua's concept of the Coyolxauhqui imperative refers to the eternal process of healing from the alienation produced by the marginality brought about by coloniality, acknowledging the wounds, embracing the fragmentation, and reconstructing the self by making do with what little we may have access to. Based on the work of Anzaldúa, this immersive VR/short film introduces you into a world haunted by transgenerational and pluridimensional dialogues stemming from beyond the late 1400s, the time of European colonization, until today, the time of imperialist worldwide warfare. This VR piece showcases a theoretical and metaphorical transhistorical discussion between and beyond the dichotomized understanding of official coloniality and resistant decoloniality representations of history and the mythopoetics of womanhood and belonging in the Americas, which connects queer feminist political critique on the experience of the loss of life in children to violence, migration, and imposed re-education programs parallel to losses experienced by Mother Earth. And finally, my own cosmovision as a first-generation U.S. citizen and Chicanx artist from the Tijuana border, often labeled as uncivil. Finally, there are multiple possible dialogues between the users and the piece itself, depending on the relationship and previous knowledge the user has of epistemologies of the South. The ambiguity and sense of mystery and confusion experienced by outsiders immersed in this VR experience reinforces the importance and value of understanding the marginalized experience of those colonized around the world. This alienation is rarely felt by those whose culture and logic are privileged by institutional representation and power. And yet for the marginalized, alienation and exclusion is a daily experience. It is as if the entire immersive world around you was saying, hey, well, this is how we feel. Welcome to our world. And even yet, it wouldn't even compare. What happens when we try to define everything with words is that we also take away from the spiritual and carnal understanding. I have had people from other cultures get emotional and cry after experiencing the Coyolxauhqui Imperative 2020, while at the same time asking if I could provide a glossary or a pamphlet explaining what each element means. This means they're unaware of what the symbolism represents, yet they're feeling something very deeply. And I refuse to include a pamphlet because that is part of the point I'm trying to make, like, come meet me where I'm at.
Before the sixth sun, there was already a land full of life and color. The fifth sun said, "Pro," and life flowed out of every corner. Under the hot beams dwelt the cactus and their flowers, the Apache plume, the Jericho rose, white sage, huachocoyoling, chuparosa, dandelion, marigold, and devil's claw. So many more grew under the recurrent blessing of the southern breeze, caressed and watered by the raindrops of the north.
to showcase the forces of coloniality and its counter-resistance through decolonial aestheses, or what Walter Mignolo refers to as the processes of thinking and doing, of sensing and existing beyond the impositions and absurdity of coloniality. Before the Sixth Sun, A Codex for Our Children, began with the idea of writing a children's book which incorporated audio, tactile, olfactory, and AR components that would retell the story of coloniality, the system of ideas and ways of thinking that remains following the invasion, injustices, and issues of indigenous lives and land stewardship through the illusion of the relationship between native medicinal herbs and important settler flowers, represented by roses, which is the national flower of England, although, plot twist, it originates from Central Asia. The textile book/codex is a work in progress produced over burlap and muslin fabric with designs and backdrops in embroidery and crochet using cotton, wool, acrylic, and silk threads. As is with indigenous textile tradition and transfronteriza knowledge production, Before the Sixth Sun creates an opportunity for a non-linear morphing genealogy of presentations of fragmentary versions of this piece, because the way the piece is exhibited will continue to change as it is embroidered and being completed, always in a non-linear way. In addition, when a person places a smart device over each of the pages, it will bring augmented reality elements to the story. The herbs and plants come to life with blinking eyes and mouths. For example, the breeze will move through the page as well as come out and be seen by the person and the environment around them. In addition, the roots will be seen coming out under the page in the museum environment as layers of unexpected movement and light. For me, working on this artisan multisensorial textile AR art animation piece recreates the sensing of the embodied person of color experience in receiving overlapping oral histories and constant movement, with the distance from receiving a static, legitimized version of history from the outside. Finally, this piece of hyper design mixes folk artistry with technology, exposing the artisan's hand as a counter story to mass production and capitalism and the uniqueness of presence, making the moment and the event more valuable than the object itself, and bringing materiality back to its connection to ritual and meaning, as well as community building.
There's so much confusion with who decoloniality and decolonizing is for. It is for everyone, and it is not all that there is. There's a tendency to believe that only those who come from countries that were once colonized by Western Europe are the ones who are in need to be decolonized. Decoloniality is a global movement, and it is a movement that needs to occur concurrently and simultaneously from multiple positions at once. How can we even fantasize about supporting the global community into a decolonial project of humanization, diversity, equity, inclusion, and a care for environmental issues if there's not a clear idea nor understanding of what we're dealing with and how these issues are inexorably interconnected? There's a problem with the way we tend to dichotomize and oversimplify history, epistemology, the notion of ourselves and of other people. This dichotomization runs parallel to the way we create borders between nations, people, identities, nature and civilization, logic and emotions, but also in the limitations that keep stunting the way we envision disciplines could possibly work together and beyond each other. As Argentinian philosopher Enrique Dussel states, the totality of political systems with their various strategic and tactical degrees can only be addressed in a significant and deep way if we think of them in the simultaneity of their parts, the political mediations and internal structures, as well as their actants and the apparently passive citizenry. It is in this understanding of the interconnectedness of the totality of systems that we can hone a critical double or even multidimensional consciousness. This critical multidimensional consciousness is nothing new to the Indigenous Americas, nor to other marginalized and minoritized groups in the context of the global North. The globe has a lot to learn from the perspectives and embodiment of Indigenous peoples. Sharing our multidimensional consciousness, in this case, a transfronteriza nepantlera rascuache sensibility, and exploring immersive experiences and experimental forms of animation and new media art can help the rest of the world see themselves from a perspective that is rarely presented to them. We can also see ourselves in ways we have not necessarily had the opportunity to articulate
or further analyze. Animation as estrangement through experimental and innovative versions of it is a powerful tool that allows for critical thinking and consciousness to arise. Consciousness is the first step toward other multiple and concurrent horizons, including but not limited to social activism, environmental consciousness, mindfulness, empathy, advocacy for a better tomorrow, and the ideation of new possible intersubjective relationships that go beyond the limited ideals imposed by coloniality on the citizens of the world. In terms of the decolonial shift, what other truths are out there? What other hyper-contextualized experiences and framing can we share and use to defy current perceptions and limitations on artistic knowledge production? Let us continue to see and support each other en la lucha que es todas las luchas, in the struggle that is all of the struggles, and in the deep understanding of the final identity that composes me, which is that I am also you. Thank you.